right, good evening, everybody, in person and in Zoom. And we have to make a special dedication. Tonight's class is sponsored in blessed memory of Marshall's parents. Thank you, Marshall, for sponsoring tonight's class. It's a new thing I did. I decided to add it to the form. If somebody wants to sponsor a day of learning, and we'll make it more festive. And Marshall bit the bullet. So here we are. All right. You bit the chicken. There you go. There you go. So thank you, Marshall, and hopefully it's there you go. And hopefully it's a good beginning to enriching these classes even further. Okay, dear friends, here's a story. You ready? Two guys are going. There you go. Okay, two guys are going hunting. They're hunting for deer. Two friends, and at one point, one friend thinks he sees something moving, gives it a shot, and hears the cry of his friend saying, "You shot me." So he pulls out his cell phone, calls 911, and says, "You guys got to help. I just by mistake shot my friend. We're out shooting. We're out hunting." So they said, "Okay, first things first. Are you sure he's dead?" She says, "1 second. Let me go check." The 911 operator hears 2 shots. The guy comes back and says, "Now he's for sure dead." All right, dear friends. It's good to laugh before we jump into a very difficult and heavy topic. And today's topic is really no joke. And just shut off my ringer here. We are talking today on our course, Decisions of Fate. We're talking about extending life. And this is an area of medical ethics. And from the Jewish, in the world of halachic literature, this is a very, really new topic of conversation. Of course, we have the roots of it earlier on, as we'll see, and as is always the case in Judaism. We look upon precedents. We want to see how our ancient and yet timeless tradition guides us. But this is a brand new problem. Today we are blessed with tools, with treatments, with medications, with interventions that allow us to extend life in ways that people never thought imaginable. No matter what comes somebody's way, we could give them some type of medicine. We could extend their life. We could hook them up to some type of machine, which is a blessing which comes with some uninvited guests, fresh, new ethical dilemmas, which are very problematic, which are very scary questions. The question starts becoming, okay, we could extend life, but should we? And at some point we're extending life, and all it's doing is prolonging suffering, whether it's physical suffering, emotional pain, emotional suffering. And this is the question we're going to be dealing with today. Just because we could extend life, should we always be extending life? And of course, there's so many, many different scenarios. So let us jump into it. That's what we got today. As we're going to do in all these classes, let's first get a case study or two. It's like that we kind of have some ideas to work with. All right, so here's case study number 1. We don't have a video, so I'm going to have to tell you the story. You ready? An Australian professor, he lives, and he's just simply not dying. God blessed him with long life. His name is David Goodall. You can see here the story in your books. And this is in 2018. He turns 104 years old, and he's in good health, good cognitive health, but he's slowly losing his independence. His eyesight is starting to go down. All of a sudden, they're starting to tell him, you need 24-hour care in your home. You can't walk around as much. At one point, his family found him. He fell, and he was on the floor for 2 days straight. And no one knew. They're like, all right, you're getting too old. But he says, I'm fully with it. At some point, he says, my life's becoming miserable. I'm 104 years old. I'm an independent guy. I want to go to the office every single day. I want to see my colleagues every day. This is not called life. I'm not interested in that anymore. And he says he wants to die. So he goes to his doctor. He says, help me commit suicide. They're like, no. Here in Australia, there's no physician-assisted suicide. And he's actually very upset. And, he's a big shot. He starts lobbying that he wants physician-assisted suicide. He wants the right to die. Or they call die with dignity. The choice to die. Choice to live, choice to die. They say no. And what he does is, he does some research, and Switzerland allows you to do elective physician-assisted suicide. You could go there, you don't have to have any pain, you don't have to have any terminal illness. All you got to do is show up and say, I want to die. And Switzerland will say, this is your place. Come on in. So he flies to Basel, Switzerland at 104 years old with a lot of media fanfare. He does a whole press release the day before. He's going for his lethal injection. to die. And he speaks, you could watch it online, very interesting. He speaks very, very proudly. He had a wonderful life. He's happy tended right now. He says goodbye to his whole family. Next he goes to the doctor gives him whatever injection it is. He administers it to himself. And that's the end of David Goodall's life. And it raised a whole storm of debate and conversation of, is this the right thing to do? On the one hand, it sounds pretty crazy. This guy's fully healthy. And I understand he's 104 years old, but so what? He's doing great. He's got a family. But he feels he's ready for his time to come. So do you just say, well, that's his right? Or do you say, there's something feels very off about that? So I'm just wondering, without getting into too much conversation, where do you guys stand on that? Do you think what David Goodall did is like, okay, it kind of makes sense, right to die. Let him do it. It's a free country. You want to die? Go ahead and die. He didn't hurt anybody in the process. He didn't take down an airplane. So gesund to hate. Like they say in Yiddish, gay gesund to hate, Right? Go, go. No one's stopping you.
He's Jewish?
I don't think so.
Oh, he's not Jewish.
No. But we're just hypothetically, what do you say from a Jewish perspective? Does that sound like the right type of thing to do, or you say wrong?
No,
Well, that's what we're here to do. Oh, there you go. Okay. Or that's an easy
From
question.
a
Or more about your gut. Well, what does your gut say? What does your feeling say? You're a doctor. What do you say?
From my personal experience, I think that if an individual has no chance of a productive life, is experiencing pain, and they choose to do it, then it's their, across the river they do that in Windsor.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Canada has much more expanded laws, right?
Again, it's from a law standpoint.
All right, so from a medical perspective, you're saying you're a doctor, you're here to help people, and somebody says, my life is done, help me end it, and that's part of helping out your patients.
But then there's physical, and then there's people that will say that it's emotional, so you have a psychiatric.
So you got to make sure that's coming from a place of health.
It's a slippery slope.
It's a slippery slope. All right, what do you say? Any other thoughts? Just by vote of hands. Who likes the idea of right to die? And don't worry, there's no shame over here. You got it. We got to be honest. No, your gut. Let's go with our gut. Let's go with our gut. What do you say?
If you're in a lot of pain, what would you do?
No. Yeah, what do you do? That's making it too personal. No, just theoretically, David Goodall, a guy no one knows in Australia.
And your full discretion. You mean your full discretion?
Your full discretion. What does your own gut feel like? It just feels right. Let him do it. Like, come on. We're supposed to tell him you're not allowed to die? You're not allowed to commit suicide in this type of responsible way? Okay, who's anti it? Who says, come on, this just feels too much? Gone too far. We're in the minority over here, the gone too far.
Well, in his case, I don't agree.
In his case.
Oh,
He's healthy, no terminal illness,
In his
he's not
case, I say
suffering.
no.
Oh,
Right.
but so over here it's real elective. You're saying terminal illness is something else.
Yeah, in his case.
Okay. So all right. So let's keep on going. But if he had, let's just clarify this for all those who are saying maybe no. If he had a terminal illness and he's in pain, would you then say yes?
Yes.
Then it's already a lot more resounding yes. Let's move on to case study number 2. So we got one case study. Remember that 104-year-old man, no pain, no terminal illness. He's electively going simply because he's done with life for whatever reason it is. All right, he's ready to go happily, and he's not kicking and screaming. Wonderful.
Well, it says in there why. He was pissed.
He was done with it, right?
Well, he was angry.
He was kicked out of his office, right? He was.
Right, and they didn't have a system to help him.
Well, it was a bunch of factors which pointed in one direction: his losing his independence. And in his mind, life meant that he could be independent. If he's not independent, well, do you want me to sit in a nursing home my whole life? I'm not doing this. I'm out. I'd rather go out now instead of sitting in an assisted living home. That was his rationale. Okay, moving on to case number 2. Totally different setup over here. And this is a real tragic story that happened about 30 years ago in Chicago. All right? And this case I want to read. Let's read it together. And Jeff, we'll start with you.
And that's
Case 52, case study B. And this is a real halachic question that was sent to Israel to Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg, who's one of the most important contemporary halachic voices, especially medical ethics. He was the chief rabbi, and I'm sorry, I know you're about to get ready. Just give me a moment over here. Let me make the introduction over here. Rabbi Waldenberg was the chief rabbi who would help the Shaare Tzedek Hospital in Jerusalem with all medical ethical questions. He had the final vote whenever there was a question. And he's a very important voice. Here's a question that was sent to him from here in the Midwest to Israel about 30 or so years ago. Go ahead.
An 11-year-old boy has been suffering for the past 2 years from a cancerous growth in his brainstem, a significant accumulation of fluid, was recently detected in his brain ventricles, and the ventriculoperitoneal shunt was surgically inserted to drain the excess fluid.
I'm actually happy I had a doctor read that. Okay, thank you.
His physicians now seek to implant a different tube because the original tube has become blocked or infected. This procedure entails minimal risk, but it will prolong the boy's life and suffering. Is there an obligation to proceed with the surgery?
There you have it. This is a horrible case. A Jewish boy in Chicago has cancer. They tried doing some intervention over here, putting in this shunt to drain the excess fluid, but there's an infection. They got to do it again. And the family is saying, okay, do we have to keep on doing this? At what point do we say we're just harassing this kid? We're just putting him through more pain, more surgeries, more sedation, and just for what? To live more, for more suffering? At what point do we say, let's just let fate be? Whatever happens, happens. Or is there a halachic mandate to say, no, we want life at all costs? So keep on doing things and intervene, but at what? At the boy's health. And let's even think about it from a financial standpoint. At some point, insurance tells you, we're not willing to cover this anymore. In our opinion, it's a game over. Insurance does that by terminal illness cases, and they'll say, at this point, it's on you. And all of a sudden, the family has all these very expensive medical bills for very, very serious surgeries and operations, and the family is wondering, do we have to do this?
I'm just gonna open the door on the other side.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good call. And you could see, who did they go to? They didn't go to like a local rabbi. Who are they going to? They're going to one of the world's top professionals in Israel. What would you say? What does your gut feel? And again, there's no shame in what your gut feels. Would you say, listen, we gotta keep on saving this kid, or do you say, let it be?
There's so many key questions that are unanswered. One of them is, how long would he live through this process? Is there a prospect of it becoming less invasive? And what is the 11-year-old, although a minor, think? What does he want to do?
That's a good question.
I don't think they-
What does he want to do? Number 2, it's his brainstem. Number 2, he has a fluid, which is.
Or something that's, not to cure
Right,
it, but
right.
to ameliorate. Did they even ask the 11-year-old what?
So you're saying, let's ask the 11-year-old boy. Okay, that's a fair thought. You're saying, let him decide what he wants to do.
It's a factor. If he wants to die, that's an important factor. If he wants to live, it's an important
If he feels that just life is too much and getting too crazy. Marshall, yes.
So, there's a difference between removing treatment.
Oh, this case is not removing treatment.
Right.
It's simply abstaining from doing anything. That's this case.
So if we talked last week about God gave us doctors to heal us, and it's okay to use doctors, it's recommended.
Mm-hmm.
But is it mandatory? If the doctor says I can do surgery, is it mandatory?
That's the question. Exactly. So in this case, we know the doctor could do a surgery, but the question is, there's so much pain and suffering, and it's a terminal illness. At what point do we just say, you don't need to go crazy and try every last avenue, especially if it's going to prolong the suffering, maybe even add suffering, who knows? That's the question here.
Even in the question, it says that there is some risk. It says minimal risk. There is some risk.
Entails minimal risk, because a rabbit would want to know, we saw last week, is it a high risk of failure? Is it a low risk of failure? Are there most chances?
I mean, it's almost, I don't know, it's an easy question, but it's an easier.
Much easier question, for sure.
But even with minimal risk, there's a chance of shortening this boy's life.
That's another thing. But it's a minimal risk, and that, by the way, this just shows you how a good question is posed by knowing what the rabbi is going to want to hear. That's really the first thing a rabbi always does whenever they hear a question. They start asking questions back. They know what questions they want to hear. Tell me, let's talk about the pain level. Let's talk about the risk level. I want to hear about this. I want to hear about that. All the prognosis. So that's actually, it just shows you how it's a well-crafted question. They're putting the important. Now, I just want to compare these two case studies. They're very different, in a certain way, diametrically different, but there's a common theme, and I want to make sure we get to that, because there's a tension here. Case study A, we're talking about somebody who's very old age. Right? There's old age. He's 104 years old. Ripe old age. What do they want to do? Marshall pointed this out. In case study A, they're talking about actively, proactively doing something to end the life. Case study B, we're talking about somebody who's very young.
My babies.
We're talking about terminal illness. Over here, he's very healthy. What do they want to do?
That's funny.
We're talking more about passive over here. Very different. Old age and active, young age, terminal illness, passive. Meaning, this last question sent to Rabbi Waldenberg, they weren't asking to do anything, they're talking about not doing anything. That was the question. Could we simply not do anything? What's the common theme over here? What's the common tension that's going on over here? Which is at the heart of today's class. What would you say? The value of life versus, no, the case IB, we didn't say he wants to die.
Active and passive. Oh, the common thing?
What's the common theme?
The right to take your own life.
The right to take your own life versus,
Living until.
it's the tension between life, extending life, versus minimizing pain. I think that's the tension, right? Right? Minimizing pain versus value of life. On the one hand, you could say life, we love life, Judaism values life more than anybody else. It sounds great in theory. At what point do we say it's not fair to the person? And at what point would we say, okay, the pain factor is a real factor? Both cases shared, it just shows you how this question could be applied in such different scenarios, different ages, terminal illness versus somebody who's 100% healthy. But he's just saying, I'm in emotional pain. I don't want to live life like this. That's emotional pain. So before we get into what Jewish law says, and we got a lot to get through tonight, all got a coffee? All got a little coffee? Get yourselves caffeinated, not decaf over here. Okay, but before we jump into the Jewish perspective, I just want to talk for a moment, a quick moment, where secular law and the secular value system stands on these issues. Not that I'm a very big professional about it, but it's worth noting. So we actually spoke about this a few years ago in a previous class. One of the most important sources for where American law stands today, United States law stands today, is from a Supreme Court ruling. It's in your books on page 53. Please take a look at it. The Cruzan case, it's considered a landmark case in 1990. And this is really where we have the tension between a patient's right when it comes to medical treatment. So here are 4 principles, and I want to add a few more ideas onto this. So number 1, principles from the Cruzan versus Director, Missouri Department of Health, Supreme Court of the United States case. Number 1, a patient has a constitutional right to refuse medical treatment. That's number 1. You walk into a hospital, an ambulance comes, you have the right to say, I don't want this. But you're going to die. No. American law is anybody could say no to treatment. Point number 2, which is a very critical detail, artificial feeding, food, is considered a medical treatment in this context. And the right to refuse treatment covers it as well. So now we're talking about getting CPR or to amputate a leg. We're even talking about artificial feeding, food. That's a basic necessity. The Supreme Court rules that is considered medical treatment, and a patient has a right to deny that. So you could have a feeding tube, and you can say, I don't want a feeding tube. But what do you mean? That's the only way you could eat. The patient has a right to refuse that. Okay, 3, another critical point over here, which touches upon Marshall's observation before. The right to refuse treatment applies to both withholding care initially, as well as withdrawing it. This is a key idea. So you could say if somebody says, I don't want to be intubated, I don't want to, I don't want to be resuscitated. But what happens if they already started, they already hooked up to the machine? And then you say, take me off of the machine. That's a different thing over here. One is actively doing something, which is removing your lifeline. The Supreme Court rules that's included in your right to refuse. Yes?
I think the thing that doesn't mention here.
One time, so let's first finish it. Let's first finish the whole, let me get through the whole thing and then we'll get to that, okay? That's number 3. Number 4, the right to refuse treatment pertains to all patients, even those who are not terminally ill. Okay, so you don't have to be terminally ill to start refusing. You could be totally healthy, you could have a whole long life to live, but it is your right to refuse treatment. Now, very key to put over here. So that's point number 1. Well, everything we just read is included in this general statement. Patients can refuse medical treatment, and that's a large umbrella according to United States law. Now, very key, which I don't know why it's not in your books, and I wonder if this is what you had in mind, Marshall. The Supreme Court clearly writes that this does not extend to physician-assisted suicide, which means you have the right to deny treatment. You don't have the right to go to a doctor and say, end my life, or help me end my life. And just by the way, a detail which which is not of relevance to today's class, there's something called physician-assisted suicide, and there's something called euthanasia. Euthanasia is when the doctor actively injects you to kill your life. So the doctor does it himself. Physician-assisted suicide, PAS, is when the doctor gives you the tools, gives you the medicine, gives you the drugs, gives you the injection, and says, "I'm not doing it. You go home and do it on yourself." You know. So that's a little bit of a difference. Some places say even allow euthanasia. Some places say no. We can't have the doctor do it, but the doctor could help you do it. For practically for today's class, it makes no difference. The Jewish perspective, at least for today, at least for the level of nuance we're going to be getting in the next hour or so. But United States law does not include in this general thing physician-assisted suicide. That said, the Supreme Court did not want to say that it's forbidden according to United States law. They simply ruled that it's not part of the rights you have. So are you allowed to do it or you're not allowed to do it? Supreme Court said they sent it back to the states. Every state should decide on their own. As of today, there's 11 states, or to be more correct, 11 jurisdictions in the United States that allows physician-assisted suicide. I don't believe Michigan is one of those states. It's not. So the Supreme Court didn't want to say it's not within your rights. They didn't want to say it is in your rights. They didn't want to say it's forbidden. They just simply said, ask your states. Okay, that is another important point over here. So physician-assisted suicide is allowed in some places, but then it goes even further. There are some places, some countries, not in America, but there are some countries that put no restrictions on assisted suicide. And the example is what we just read in the case study. We didn't read it, but it's there in the text. It's Switzerland. This is David Goodland. What was his name again? Goodar. Okay, he flew to Basel, Switzerland, and he said, "I resented I couldn't do it in Australia." Switzerland is the most liberal when it comes to this. They let anybody at any age, at any condition, do physician-assisted suicide. You don't have to have a great excuse. The only thing is you have to, I think, sign a piece of paper that you're not going to use it to get your life insurance for your family. So you can't use it as a way. And they even allow tourists to do it. So there are people, and it's pretty crazy. Suicide tourism, it's called.
You have to be an adult though to follow it.
So you have to be an adult.
I think those have a psychiatric test for that.
I don't think so. Maybe in Canada you need that. Canada, I know that they're working on that. So, yes, Marshall, go ahead.
The point that's not here, and I think the original case was for transfusion for Jehovah's Witnesses, and an adult can decline it. But I think there was a ruling that minors, the state can take custody of minors to give them a transfusion, even if it's against their religion.
That is interesting. Okay, so that's not of relevance to today's class. That was part of it, huh?
Once it's part of, you can decide, you can't decide to not save the life of your child if it's your religious belief in this country.
Right. So a child
Can I
is a
add
different
something
story.
here?
Override it for a child.
Can I add something here?
Yes, go ahead, Adina.
So first of all, what he said is correct. I know that each state is different, but I know New York State law does not allow for Jehovah's Witnesses to refuse blood for their children. So that is correct. But what I wanted to comment about what you said before, they actually withholding and withdrawing treatment is considered the equivalent, even though psychologically it's very different and halachically it's very different, but it's viewed on a secular perspective as the exact same thing.
That's right.
In terms of withholding treatment. In terms of patients being able to refuse treatment, even if a patient does not have mental capacity, if they refuse treatment, you cannot treat them against their will unless it's life-threatening. So any patient that comes in who's refusing treatment, if it's a life-threatening emergency and you need to treat them or do surgery to save their life, you're allowed to override them. But if it's not a life-threatening emergency, they can refuse even if they don't have mental capacity.
Is that
for other
federal law
decisions.
or New York State law?
So I know that's New York State. I don't know. I think it varies state by state. I know New York State law.
Adina, what's your profession?
So I'm a PA, but I also have a degree in medical ethics.
All right, very cool. All right, wonderful. Look at this. So I just said that I'm not such a big professional over here, but look, we got all these professionals over here to fill in for me. So I think generally, can everybody give me a thumbs up? I generally got it right. Generally speaking, we got it right. Here are the key points. According to secular law, patients can refuse medical treatment, which is a pretty broad umbrella, which includes withdrawing treatment that was already administered. Physician-assisted suicide for terminally ill is allowed in some states, some countries. If you look in your books on page 54, we have the full list over here, the full map. And some countries even don't place any restriction on it and fully allow physician-assisted suicide. Now, where is secular law coming from? I think we can all understand where secular law is coming from. Secular law is here, Western secular law is here to protect your rights. We want you to be able to live your life of freedom, liberty, and happiness, which could even include death, if that's what makes you happy, right? So, as long as you're not taking anybody down with you, Gesundheit. Now, not so much Gesundheit. The Supreme Court was still a little bit scared to go and say, yeah, physician-assisted suicide will even help you. Part of healthcare is the right to die. They didn't want to do that. Why not? There's all these voices. Why not? One of the key reasons why not is because they're scared of it spiraling out of control and creating a culture where society doesn't want old people. And can you imagine if all of a sudden it becomes that 8 out of 10 old people choose physician-assisted suicide, and here's one Zadie who says, no, I'm going to stick it out till the end. And his whole family's resentful and says, look, Zadie, why are you being so stubborn? Everybody else, all your friends did physician-assisted suicide. You go do physician-assisted suicide. So the Supreme Court is scared. If somebody wants to die, that's your right. What they're scared of is it's going to create a bad culture, which is going to be very hard to turn back on, which is that all of a sudden people are being pressured to end their life, and that infringes on rights. So that's kind of where the Supreme Court is scared to go out and say clearly, this is your right, for sure, go ahead, physician-assisted suicide. So they're holding back. But the basic premise that secular law is coming from is, it's your right, and therefore they go all out. You even forget about withholding care, withdrawing care. You've already have life-saving care, and you as a patient say, take it off from me, I don't want it. It's your right at some point. We just got to let that happen. Okay. But we're not here to talk about secular law. We just want to get a little bit of an idea so that we can start contrasting it a little bit. Where does Judaism stand on this issue? I want to split the rest of today's class, about an hour, in 2 parts. First, let's talk about actively inducing death, which we'll call merciful death. And then we'll talk about, which is a more stickier and nuanced area of withholding care. Maybe we're not going to actively help somebody die, but we'll just not do anything. And we'll let nature just play itself out. So let us begin. Let's split up into 2. Let's begin with merciful death. Where does Judaism stand? So let's first begin with the basic idea. Where does Judaism come from? And we're going to build upon last week's class. Where is Judaism coming from? Okay, Judaism is not at all coming from the perspective of rights. Judaism is not here just simply to let you, that's not the perspective. Your life, your body, your life, do whatever you want. Your choice, that's not Judaism's perspective. Life is a gift from God. Your body is a gift from God, like we learned last week. Taking good care of your health is a mitzvah. Listening to doctors is a mitzvah. Getting medical intervention is a mitzvah. So this is also a very, very big conversation over here. What makes you more comfortable in the moment is not at all Judaism's perspective. That's not at all Judaism's consideration. It is very much about what is the sacred, what is the holy thing to do, what is the right choice to make from a purely divine, objective, ethical perspective. That's a tall order over here. Now, before we jump in, I just want to mention something, and I mentioned it last week, and I'm probably going to mention it every single week. This is an area of life which chances are you personally or a family member or somebody you know very dearly had to make a call, had to make a decision. And I don't want any of you to, if we study anything, which obviously you discover, maybe Judaism would not have been supportive of your thing. The tone of today's class is not to give condemnations for the past. We're here to learn and discover and gain knowledge for the future. And the tone, I hope, that we're going to get from the text, and I hope my tone that comes across is one of sensitivity and of compassion, and we're here to study. We're not here to look back and give guilt for decisions we made. So I very much want that to be the tone over here. We're looking forward. We're here to learn. It's here to be as difficult as a topic it is. We're here to it's to be a joyful experience of learning Torah. So that said, let us begin. Where do we begin to understand where Judaism must stand on merciful death? Well, let's go back to the Torah, to the book of Genesis. As we all know, the human enterprise originally, version 1.0, very quickly degenerated, and the world became totally immoral and horrible, and God said, okay, we got to start over, reboot the whole system. Great flood will keep only Noah and his family to survive, and let's try it again. Okay, so that's what happens. Great flood. We know the whole story. And now Noah and his family come out of the ark. And God says, okay, your job is to repopulate the world, but let's set down some ground rules. All right? Let's try to do this a little bit more level-headed over here. And this is one of the statements that God speaks to Noah and to his family. Text 1 on page 58. Fran, would you like to read? Text 1 from Genesis, page 58. You got it? Don't worry about it. There you go.
It's hard for me to use my fingers.
Don't worry about it.
Here we go. Okay, text 1. I will demand an accounting of your lifeblood from the hand of each human, from the hand of each person for that of their brother. I will demand an accounting for a fellow human's life. Whoever sheds human blood shall have their blood shed by humans, for God made the human in his image.
Here we have it. This is the biblical source, not the only, but one of the most important sources of the idea of the sanctity of human life. Okay. The words of the Torah are unbelievably precise, and there's no poetry, and there's no extra comma. There's nothing. So let's try to take apart this verse. Number 1, I will demand an accounting for your lifeblood. So God says this is big business. Your lifeblood, I take that serious. Let's think what's going on over here. From the hand of each human, from the hand of each person for that of their brother, I'll demand an accounting for a fellow human's life. So first of all, we got double accountings over here. God says twice I'm going to account for blood. And then also over here, from the hand of each human, from the hand of each person for that of their brother. Does it make a difference who's the murderer, if it's another human being or if there's a brother involved? What's this repetitious language? So it's a loaded verse, or loaded verses. So what are all the details that these verses are carrying? So the commentaries are telling us. Okay, the first statement is a standalone statement. I'll demand an accounting for your lifeblood. That is the prohibition against suicide. Accounting for your lifeblood. If a human being personally takes their own life, that number 1 is wrong. But then we have from the hand of each human, from the hand of each person for that of their brother, that's already not suicide, that's murder, homicide. Right? Prohibition against homicide. One person takes somebody else's life. But what's this idea of, again, that of their human? And that human for them, the brother. What's the human and the brother going on over here? So one of the commentaries says something so fascinating. There are 2 types of murders. There are 2 types of homicides. There's one homicide from a stranger to a stranger. I don't know, with malicious intent, ill intent. I don't know, he's a murderer, he's a thief. Then there's homicide by a brother. What does that mean? Homicide done out of fellowship, out of brotherness. I love you, so I'm going to kill you. Well, what does that mean? Let's read. Powerful text here. Text 2. So we're going to go to you, Susan. Text 2 on page 59.
There are 2 forms of murder. One is murder intended to be detrimental to the victim, as an act of revenge or in order to seize the victim's money or the like. A second form of murder is to benefit the other, when someone is overwhelmed with tremendous pain and prefers death to life. The Torah addresses both scenarios. Regarding murder with detrimental intent, the Torah warns, from the hand of each human. By contrast, the second form of murder committed with the consent of the suffering individual and for their benefit may even be perpetrated by a virtuous friend who may believe the act is a mitzvah. The Torah therefore warns, from the hand of each person for that of their brother.
Right, big idea over here, right? So you've got regular homicide from the hand of each human, which is homicide, which is malicious murder. But then you have from the brother. That's the second one, mercy killing. I'm coming to help you. It's a doctor who helped somebody end his life, and he goes home and said, I'm a good person. I just administered health care. I'm helping people. I'm helping my patients. I helped somebody die peacefully. This is what he wanted. So I'm not a murderer. I'm helping somebody. This is out of love. This is out of compassion, out of mercy. Oh, this text says you may think that's a mitzvah. Marshall, do you mind getting the doors behind you? Not a bad idea. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Marshall. So Torah says right over here, right at the dawn of humanity version 2.0, sounds like a good idea. That is immoral. That is forbidden. That is considered homicide in Judaism, which is a very big statement. By the way, you know what the words euthanasia mean? It's ancient Greek, which means good death. Good death. Not all deaths are bad. This is good death. So you're getting a little bit of an idea where the Torah is coming from. This is a brotherly death. I'm here as a brother to try to help you. That's even homicide. And the verse also gives us the reason. The verse doesn't just tell us that it's wrong, that it's forbidden. It gives us the why, which is the final words of the verse. I'll demand an accounting, and it gives us the law. Whoever sheds human blood shall have their blood shed by humans. This is the source for the idea that if a murderer is found guilty in a Jewish Supreme Court, only a Supreme Court could do it, a Sanhedrin, then they are put to death. The death penalty. Judaism believes in death penalty, but we did a whole class once upon a time about that. Max was there, Elke was there. I don't know who else. Maybe the Logans? No, you were not there yet. No, you were not there yet. Crime and Consequence. That's it. Okay? It was our only second course. It was our second course we did. Okay, but so we're not going to get into the whole, how and when and why, but that's the idea. And why? Here we have the reason. For God made the human in his image. That's the key idea. For God made a human in his image. Generally, why is murder wrong? When we think from a Western perspective, because you're infringing on somebody else's rights. Somebody has a life to live. They have a family. They have the joys. They have the opportunities. And you're robbing them of that life that they could have lived. But Judaism doesn't say that. Meaning, of course, we all understand logically that it's simply an offense to the other person if you murder them. And it's an offense to their family, everything. But it's an offense to the divine image that they carry. That is the fundamental issue over here, which means it's not just between you and another human being. You messed just now with God. Why? Because God's image is in a human being. And when you murder somebody else, you remove a soul from this world, you're removing God's presence from this world. And you are hurting God's presence, the divine image. That's a direct offense against God. The Midrash gives here a beautiful analogy. The Midrash says, imagine that there's a king over a massive kingdom. And the king over a massive kingdom, he doesn't visit every single one of his provinces and countries, all the time. There's one province, the first time in 10 years, the king is coming to visit. It's like the Olympics. What happens when the Olympics comes to town? The whole town, brand new buildings and brand new monuments. That's a brand new city all of a sudden. That's what they do. They're putting up new statues. Statues of the king is going up. And they minted brand new coins. Now the coins carry the image of the king, engraved with the king's image. So imagine somebody comes and goes to a brand new statue of the king, defaces it. And he goes to a coin and he destroys the coin. Did he offend the material? Is that what happened over here? You broke a little piece of silver. Or you broke the marble. Or is it an offense against the architect? Or is it an offense against the taxpayers who paid for it? It's an offense against the king. Why? Because this bears the image of the king. So forget about what you're doing to the stone or to the architect. You're offending the king, because this is the representation of the king. So the Medrash says murder is so horrible. Why? Because every human being is an imprint of God in this world. So when you hurt somebody else and you take away that life, you're messing with God over here. This is already a high-level situation over here. With this principle that we have over here, that homicide doesn't only include malicious killing or malicious murder, even mercy, even friendly brotherly killing is considered homicide in Judaism. And because this is not about quality of life, you're robbing him of life, you're robbing him of the whole, all that doesn't matter. This is about divine image. So once it's about divine image, it really doesn't matter what your quality of life is. It doesn't matter life expectancy. Nothing matters all of a sudden at this point. Here's a human being. They're breathing. What's their quality of life? It could be a vegetable. I don't care what they are. Here is a soul, which is a divine image of God. That's why Judaism takes a very extreme position over here. And let's read that Ted in text 3 from a very important halachic work, Aruch HaShulchan, page 60.
A person in the throes of death is regarded as a living person in every respect. Sanachot, chapter 1, verse 1. Though the patient is in terrible agony and they consider death preferable, they are nevertheless forbidden to do anything to hasten their death. The universe and all therein belongs to God, and this is his will.
So there you have it. Judaism believes we don't care what's going on over here. The person could be in the throes of death. He's dying anyways in 3 minutes. He's bleeding out. He's begging, take my life, end my misery. Not allowed to. but he's suffering so much. See, he says over here, the universe and all therein belongs to God. This is his will. That's Judaism's perspective. So, one second. We could kind of already close the conversation on this issue. In Dr. Goodall's case, he's 104 years old, quality of life is horrible, help me die. You say the guy's 104, you know what I'm saying? Let him go. Let him go. Let him go with dignity. That's what they call it, right? Dying with dignity. That's what they call it. Let me die with dignity. Judaism would say you're not allowed to. I don't care. You can be terminally ill. It doesn't matter. This is the divine image. We don't begin to touch it. But the person suffering, that's God's business. Why does God want this? We don't know. Let's not play God. Marshall, yes.
So if the Sanhedrin ordered execution on their own volition, then whoever is the executioner, by whatever means, is sanctioned. And what about in secular society? If someone's on death row and he's exhausted all of his...
Let's save this for the death penalty class. This is really totally irrelevant to today's class.
But you would be killing someone.
Let's save it for the death penalty class. Is death penalty warrant? Does Judaism believe that secular court should have the right to kill somebody? So that's a whole class. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
My question is this: the source of what I just read is not the Tanakh, but it's Aruch HaShulchan, the long table.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the question I have is this statement on a par with what we just read a couple pages ago?
Yeah, why not?
Well, originally we're getting Genesis.
No, so this is a text. This is a text which is pretty contemporary. Rabbi Epstein was pretty contemporary. I'm saying not very, but he passed away in 1908. Jewish time, that's pretty contemporary. But he's a halachic codifier. So he's coming and giving you the aggregate. He's giving you the final line. He's quoting over here Smachot, which is a Mishnah. So he's not making this up. He's not the first one who said this. This is just a good. So yeah, no, don't worry. Good question. Good and fair question. So yes.
What if it's the opposite situation? Are you considered a murderer if you do it by being passive? For example, let's say it's the opposite scenario. You have a guy who's very big pain, and you really love the person, but they beg, I want to live. But you think they're miserable, so you don't do anything about it.
They're begging to live?
Yeah, but you...
We'll still talk about that towards the end of the class. The case of passive intervention and patient's desire to live. We're going to talk about that. But okay, let's wait for that. About passive is soon. Okay, now, this is very different. This whole attitude, talking about the divine image and the very hard-line stance that Judaism takes on this, really is different from secular law. Just consider these 2 points. Number one, in Judaism, physician-assisted suicide is going to be always prohibited. Why? For the same reason. There's no excuse which ever gives you the reason to tamper with the divine image. And like the text says, it's a key line. This is God's business. This is his will. So you think you can be smarter than God? No. Judaism doesn't believe in that in this case. Okay. Another key idea over here, which let's now contrast. If you're not allowed to kill somebody, that includes you're not allowed to do anything active to cause somebody's death. So forget about putting a bullet through their head. Let's talk about, okay, they're in pain so much, let's start toning down the ventilator. Let's tone down, we just won't refill the feeding tube. Are you allowed to do that? Or let's pull the plug, as they call it, right? Okay, we'll remove oxygen. We'll take something away which will cause them to die. You're not allowed to do that. You're doing something which is causing death. And from Judaism's perspective, that's fundamentally no different than going to somebody's boat out at sea, making a hole in it, and saying, good luck. Well, I told the guy I made a hole in a boat. What happened afterwards? None of my business. You're causing somebody's death pretty directly. So that is expediting death is something which Judaism would be totally against. Secular law says that part of your right to refuse medical treatment includes withdrawing treatment, which is actively ending a life. So, causing death, whether directly through physician-assisted suicide or by doing something, removing, withdrawing treatment that the person already got, and now you're going to say, I'm going to take you off from this treatment, which directly causes death. This is totally wrong according to Judaism. Now, we have the final line. Before we move on to the new topic, I want to discuss this a little bit with you, because we have over here a very interesting take that Judaism does not believe that a life is ever worth ending, period. And that's sometimes a hard pill to swallow. Somebody's in tremendous pain, or somebody's literally bleeding out, and you could help them end the suffering save them the few minutes of agony. Why do you have to do that to them? Why would Judaism take such a hard line? Never, ever, even for 5 minutes, even for 3 minutes. Why is Judaism saying that? So you could just say, well, listen, it's God's business. God wants it here. Okay, so why would God want it over here? Like, let's try to get a little bit into the Torah's head. Why would the Torah say that every value of life is meaningful? When from a Western perspective, we could say this life is just wasted. The person sitting as a vegetable, God forbid. What value is there here? They're emotionally suffering because their brain still works. What are you doing to them? Or somebody's brain dead. Or somebody is, they're in a coma. They're not waking up. There's 0% medically that this person's ever going to wake up. The family's suffering. They're suffering. So, God Almighty, just help them out over here. End the life. What value is there in that life? Okay, this is an area which we could say that we don't know. This is God's business, and God has his calculations, and we will never understand what God's plan is for an individual soul that is suffering. But let's at least go through a few ideas. Will any of these ideas explain any specific situation? I don't know. Maybe they all would apply in some situation. Maybe there's a situation that none of these would apply. But they'll give us some idea of how Judaism thinks. Think Jewish. How does Judaism see a life? And it will give us a little bit of better insight into, okay, we're going to have a little bit of a new respect for even a moment of life, even when the whole world would say, come on, this is not a life. Let it end. Okay? Yes, Marshall.
So on the second one, on Jewish one, it says, anything that will cause expedited deaths prohibited. Does that include anything that could possibly cause death?
Or it's only a possibility.
I had a patient with lung cancer, and she was in severe pain, and the only thing that would relieve her pain was morphine, which could suppress the breathing. So you're in a dilemma. If you give the morphine, it will relieve the pain.
Uh-huh.
But if it suppresses the breathing, it could possibly expedite the death.
That is a very good question.
And we
I don't know.
the percentage,
That's-
You give one person a milligram, you give another person 3, so how do you address that question?
That's outside of the purview. That's already a nuance that we're not going to be able to get to in today's class. And I don't know the answer, frankly.
So I gave her what I thought was right, and she didn't die that night.
So that was good. That was good.
Another question for you.
It worked out, yes.
So a father to a son, say his last kidney,
Uh-huh.
he will now be on dialysis, and
Mhm.
likely his life would be the end of his life.
Right,
would be
could
hastened,
you
but
put
now the
your
child
life, can you
would
put
be-
your life on the line to save another life?
Yeah.
So that's another great question, which is also outside the purview of today's class. We
might be here all night.
we could do this class for 3 years straight every week, and we'll all come up with the more fateful
I mean,
questions.
you're now making dialysis necessary for the adults.
We somewhat touched upon such a type of question about a year ago, where we spoke about it in terms of the Holocaust, people giving away their cards that would save them from going to the or even stealing it. What if, could you steal to save your own life? So, but that is a little bit. So let's talk a little bit. What would be the way Judaism sees a moment of life, which would make us say, okay, you know what? I kind of see where Judaism is saying we can't touch a life. So I'm going to give you 4 ideas, and all these are about finding value in the final moments of life. And again, every situation is unique. Every patient is unique. Will this specific point speak to the case of this person, of this case? I don't know. And that you could find cases which will say, none of your suggestions apply to this case. Okay. It's again, this is God's business, but a little bit of an idea. Let's go through. The first point, let's begin with text 4, a Mishnah from the Ethics of Our Fathers, page 61. Marshall, would you like to give us a read?
A single moment of repentance and good deeds in this world is greater than all the pleasures of the next world. And a single moment of bliss in the world to come is greater than all the pleasures of the present world.
Oh, okay. Somewhat of a famous Mishnah from our Ethics of Our Fathers. You want to know where life is more pleasurable? World to come. Heaven is a lot more pleasurable. But where is life more meaningful? Where is importance? Where is greatness in a moment here on earth of repentance and good deeds? So let's leave the word repentance for a moment. Let's speak about good deeds. Judaism has a very radical and unique take of the power of one moment of one Jew doing one mitzvah. There is nothing greater in all of history than a moment that a Jew does a mitzvah. It's pretty crazy. That's how Judaism sees it. There's nothing that you could stack against a moment of a Jew doing a mitzvah and saying, okay, this is better than that. No, The greatest thing that could exist in any sphere of reality is a Jew doing a mitzvah for that one moment. That's a radical take. But now let's apply this to the life that people would say, come on, the person's suffering, there's no quality of life. 1 second. This person can have opportunity to do another mitzvah. Maybe they could give charity. Maybe they could encourage or help a family member, a grandchild. Maybe it's going to come Rosh Hashanah, they're going to hear shofar in the hospital. Maybe they could say a prayer, they could put on tefillin one more time. I actually had the honor a few months ago. I met a friend of mine in Soul Cafe. And could be some of you saw this on Facebook or Instagram. And he says, 1 second, are you, I was just sitting there, I was doing some work. He said, are you available for a little bit? My dad's in the hospital. He was right across the street in Henry Ford. And he was not doing good. He was not doing good. It was one of his final days alive. And he says, can you put on tefillin with my father? I said, sure, there you are. That's an easy sell for me. So we went right away to the hospital. And his father was, for the most part, out of it. He says his father was never as alert before or after, since he was put into the hospital, as when he put on tefillin. He was very alert. He said the Shema. That was his final time putting on tefillin. A few days later, I saw on Facebook that he passed away. So it was a tremendous honor for me. But for me, he was suffering. He was physically suffering. He wasn't even there mentally. He was slipping in and out of consciousness, in and out of even awareness. But he had that moment of putting on tefillin. So Judaism would say, you can't end a life. There's another mitzvah that could happen here. Potentially, maybe. But who are you? How could you take this? If life is worth anything, it's worth that moment. They could do a mitzvah. So this already gives us a little bit of an idea of where Judaism is saying. We're measuring the value of life, the value of a moment changes dramatically once you think Jewish about it. So the first one is a good deed. Any good deed that could happen over here, that is where it's at. Okay, point number 2. Which this text said as well, a single moment of repentance, of tshuva. Let's put that up over here, repentance. In Judaism, tshuva is one of the most important things. Now, what does tshuva mean? We have the word repentance, which, that's a Christian word, penitent, to become a penitent. It's not about, it's not so much about regret. The greatest moment of life is when a Jew could be in touch with the truth of their own soul. That clarity that comes with being in tune with your own truth. And looking back at a past mistake and being able to say, you know what, I regret it. That was not the right decision. And having that moment of clarity. That moment of being able to be in touch with your own inner truth, with the own inner purity of your own soul. And to say, you know what, I'm past that. That's not the real me. That is extremely valuable. For a soul here on earth to first make a little mistake, and we all make mistakes, we all fall, but then to get back up and say, you know what, that wasn't right. A moment of that is so precious. Judaism believes that could happen instantaneously. All it needs is a firm moment of mental and emotional connection to your own soul, to your own inner divinity, and say, you know what, that's called tshuva. That is so valuable. That is so valuable. You cannot compromise a person's ability to have that moment. They could be suffering, they could be dying any moment. And we all know that sometimes the most moments of clarity happen when you're staring death in the face. So you can't end that life. You may be robbing this person of the opportunity to do tshuva. Just to share with you a quick story. The Talmud says a story. It's pretty crazy. There's a man, his name was Elazar ben Dordaya. Now, Elazar ben Dordaya was a notorious glutton, an Epicurean. He was the world's greatest sinner, and not by mistake. He was actively looking for every pleasure and every offense he could do in the world. He was doing the cheeseburger made out of bacon on Yom Kippur. I don't know what else could you add to the, let's every sin in the book. He was on a mission. That was Elazar ben Dordaya. Now, part of it was, every physical pleasure he could have, he needed to experience life. He had a very big bucket list, and any pleasure he heard of, he needs to do it. In any case, Elazar ben Dordaya hears about a prostitute that the saying is, her Yelp review is, that no one is like her. So he's like, all right, I've been with many prostitutes, but she seems like, that's next level. I got to go to her. So he literally drives himself crazy to travel far away to meet this woman. And the woman hears what type of lens he went to. And she says, you're the worst person alive. And he's like, you'll never make it to heaven. You'll burn in hell forever because, you're just nuts. And Elazar ben Dodaya hears this, and he went to her to have fun, not to get a little bit of a shake, not to get a shake-up. But it hit a raw nerve with him. Talmud says Elazar ben Dodaya, he kind of has this moment of realization, he sobers up real quickly, and he goes out to the field, and the Talmud describes that he sat down on the field, and he went into a fetal position with his head between his legs, and he cried his soul out. He had that moment of clarity, that moment of truth. And it was so painful and so raw that he died. He cried himself to death. That's it. And the Talmud says that when he died, a voice came out from heaven that said, Elazar ben Dodaya was just entered into heaven. Can you imagine a life of sin, a life of gluttony? But that moment of clarity is when a person's in touch with the truth of your own soul, and that is a magical moment, and that is the power to even undo a life of cruelty, of who knows what. But it works. So Judaism would say, you can't rob a person from that ability to do tshuva. That is one of the most precious moments of life. You could say, the guy's dying anyways, let's end his misery 10 minutes earlier. But you know what could have happened in those 10 minutes? That moment of tshuva could have happened. You can't do that. So this is another element over here. Okay. But now you could argue, okay, good deeds, repentance, well, you're relying on the fact that the person is conscious. You're relying on the fact the person could operate. What happens if somebody's in a vegetative state? What happens if somebody's in a coma? Let's say somebody can't even function. So there's no mitzvahs happening. There's no tshuva happening. The guy is out. What could you say then? Okay, well, let's now discuss the third idea. It goes even further, the value of life. As we spoke before, every single soul in this world is created in the divine image. Now, let's just think about this for a moment. Physically, we all know no two human beings are alike. No two fingerprints are alike. No two people ever looked exactly alike, which is a pretty crazy feat. No two people ever looked alike. And the physical mirrors the spiritual. No two souls are alike, which means, and this is a pretty crazy idea, every single one of us are a unique expression of God in this world. Every single one of us are a unique imprint of God in this world. And there is nobody else that reflects God in this world like me, whoever existed or whoever will exist. You are a one-of-a-kind, unique expression of God. And God has nobody else that will take this prism, this unique element of God, whatever it is, this imprint of God, and radiate it here in this world like you. You are literally one of a kind. So it's not like you could say, we care about species that are going extinct. If there's only 150 birds left of this species, all of a sudden we care about every single bird. But nobody cares about a duck. A duck gets killed. All right, a duck got killed. An airplane flies into a flock of geese, and the geese nobody cares about the geese. You want to make sure the airplane's okay. It can land. 30 geese got killed because it got stuck into the. What a big deal! No, geese. There'll be another goose coming up. There'll be another duck. Nobody cares. A human being, all of a sudden, Judaism says, no. There's nobody else like you. It's not just that we're all created in the divine image, but we're each uniquely created in the divine image. Nobody else shines like you. And God forbid, when there's a murder, it's not just an offense to the divine image. It is robbing the world, the only unique expression that this person had of God in this world. And to add to that, let's read this next text. It's most manifest. Your unique expression of God is most manifest at the moments of death. Let's read text 5, page 62. Elki, we're up to you. This is from the Rebbe.
At the time of birth, when the new soul, the actual part of God, descends, a fresh expression of godliness enters the world. At the actual moment of birth, the soul's life and revelation remain concealed in a corporeal body. Its expression depends on the person actively circulating their body through divine service. The more spiritual refinement a person introduces to their body, the brighter their soul shines forth. And the more
This is a little bit of a mystical take over here, but what the Rebbe is basically saying is that the most you'll get in a person's, the most you'll get of a person's soul shining, this unique divine imprint of God shining in this world, is the moment of death. And which makes this moment even more critical. This is a moment we have a human being who's shining a unique ray, a unique prism, like unique ray, you know, like the, it's like what the, what's the word I'm looking in for? Or, right, or you can take like a simple light and you have a chandelier, all those, oh, the crystals, there you go, crystal chandelier, it bends it, and then you have different colors, exactly. So you got to think about that. Every single soul takes a unique, specific element of God and irradiates that in this world. And it's most manifest at the moment of death. This is a holy moment. You can't compromise that. That's point number 3 over here, which is the light of the soul. Okay, there's more to say about them. Let's keep on moving on. One final point. One final point is, maybe you could say this person's suffering. Maybe you could say this person is simply non-functional. There's zero quality of life. There's no reason to keep them going. But we don't understand the soul's mission on earth. And very often a soul's mission is that their presence also influences others. What is the influence that they are having, even if not by their own choice, but simply by their own presence, upon family members, upon their surroundings? What mitzvahs are they helping other people do? They're helping other people display true care, display real unconditional love. They're helping other people, inspiring them about what the meaning of real life is, what real commitment is, what life is about, what family is about, what love is about, what human dignity is about. And the idea of the power of what one person has on other people, inspiring others, is very, very big. Either by them actively doing things or even by their own presence. And we know that. When we have somebody in our family who, God forbid, is going through a difficult time, is end of life, it has a very deep impression upon the family. And that impression, even if you could say this life is suffering, but that's part of their spiritual journey. And it's part of what they're doing, how they're influencing others. So let's read that in text 6. This is from Rabbi Yitzchak Breitowitz, who's a very important, real contemporary voice. He's still alive. He has a lot of good videos on YouTube. And he's a halachic authority. And let's read what he says in text 6, page 64, Debbie.
The reader may legitimately ask, what use is the life of a person who is comatose and incapable of any cognitive brain functioning? What use is an anencephalic child? Keep in mind, however, that a Jew believes in a soul and that the body is simply a receptacle for a person's true spiritual essence. Souls come to earth for many, many purposes, and we don't know why God sends souls into this life. Sometimes it could be that the spiritual destiny of a soul is to elicit certain responses on our part. The soul exists to teach us certain things about the meaning of life and love and how we relate to the dignity of a human being. And when we fail to respond with sensitivity and respect for the unconditional value of that person's life, we kill off a small part of ourselves as well.
Yeah, that's a heavy statement over there, huh? When we fail to respect the unconditional value of another person's life, we kill off a small part of ourselves as well. What influence does somebody else have? So I have a little memory, which I think maybe ties into this. I'll share it with you. So when I was a 12-year-old boy, my great-grandmother, who I was very fortunate to know, she lived into her early 90s. And I remembered her when she was strong and, relatively young. But here she was in the hospital. It was her final moments of life, and she was, I don't know exactly what was going on, but she was basically already unconscious. She was in a coma or whatever at the last weeks of her life. So I remember the very last time that I went to visit her. I went with my father, with a few of my siblings, and we were all little kids. We went to see our great-grandmother. She was in the hospital, and of course she wasn't conscious. So we spent a few minutes there, maybe. Then we left the room, and I remember my father stopped us in the hallway, like just maybe 30 feet away from the door, and says, "Kids, I want you all to stop. I want you to think in your mind some memories of Elter Babi," which is how we called in Yiddish our great-grandmother, because this might be the last time we're going to see her. And I remember that moment a lot better than actually seeing my great-grandmother. I maybe have like a fuzzy memory of being there in the room, but that like introspection, like stop for a moment. And my father was right. That was the last time we saw her. Next time we were by the funeral. And that was very powerful. Here's a great-grandmother, and she had a lot of great-grandkids. I can't say she had a very big, but the fact was she had a certain influence in our lives, even though she was in a coma. But I have a very impressionable memory of a certain moment of life. And she wasn't functioning, but she had an effect on her great-grandchild. It's a very, it's a very holistic, it's a very deep way of looking at things over here. But that's what we're saying over here. There's, who knows what that's part of here. So this is the idea of finding the value. But at the end of the day, we'll never know. We'll never truly know what does God have in store for this life, who's at the end of life, terminally ill and suffering. Who knows what? And it could be the human impulse would say, come on, let's have pity on this person. Let's just end this life. It's a mystery. What does God want? But here we have at least a few ideas to give us a little bit of a sense of, think Jewish, how Judaism thinks about this. There's no moment of life which is wasted. There's no moment of life which is useless. The divine mission lives on. And this is the Jewish approach. This is the basic idea. Jewish ethics takes a responsibility-based approach to life's dilemmas. We're not looking at it from an emotional perspective. We're not looking at it from an intellectual perspective. It is very much about we have a responsibility to life as a God-given entity. And that's where it comes from. Okay, dear friends, I want to show you a little video that really speaks to this, but I'm going to save it for the end. We have only about 20 minutes left for the next big part of today's class. We're going to be talking now about withholding treatment. Okay, so till now we spoke about actively ending a life. We spoke about that there's zero negotiating room. There's zero gray space in this discussion. There's no ending a life. There's no doing anything that will help proactively bring the end of life sooner. That is off the table, and we spoke pretty considerably about that understanding of how Judaism sees the value of life. But, dear friends, now we have a question of, okay, we spoke about active steps, taking active steps. What about just being passive, which was a question that was posed to Rabbi Waldenberg that we spoke about at the beginning of the class. 11-year-old boy, we already did so much intervention. There's now another issue. Should we just say, you know what, we're not going to end his life, but let's just hands off. Let's let it play out. Or do we say, no, we love life. Fight for life no matter the price. Fight for life no matter the cost. We got to do it. So what's the perspective we take over here? Now, you may say, looking at how obsessed Judaism is with every single moment of life, you could say, you know what, if we had the opportunity to prolong life, we got to do it. You could argue that. But as we're going to see that actually when it comes to this question, Judaism already says, no, this is already a lot more nuanced. Actively ending life? Never. Passively withholding care in a case of suffering? Okay, there's already what to discuss over here. And I'm already going to show you that there's already more, there's more of a spectrum of where the leading halachic authorities stand on this case. So we have 20 minutes. Let's at least try to get a taste of it in the next 20 minutes. How are we doing? Do we need a little breather over here, or are we doing okay? Maybe I need a breather. What was that?
You're the one talking.
I'm the one talking. All right, and the mind sometimes needs a breather as well. Okay. So let us go like this. Let us read and study two texts, which are foundational texts that speak to this question. Withholding care, are we allowed to, should we, when they're suffering? And these two texts are the ones that the modern day halakhic authorities use as their precedents to understand what would Judaism's position be on here. So let's study these two texts and let's really try to think through what are these texts telling us? What's the principle behind this text? So let's begin with the first text, which is actually not a halachic text. It is a story of the Talmud. Text 7, page 66. And Stuart, we're holding by you, right?
Yeah.
So this is a very interesting story. Text 7, go ahead.
This is what occurred on the day that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi died. The sages proclaimed a fast, and he supplicated for divine mercy, so that he would not depart from the world. Rabbi Yehuda's maid went up to the attic and prayed. The angels on high asked, for Rabbi Yehuda to ascend, and the people below asked for Rabbi Yehuda to remain. May it be your will that those below prevail over those above. Later, however, when she saw that he was in great pain, she prayed, may it be your will that those above prevail over those below. The sages, however, would not cease praying, which prevented the heavens from gathering his soul. So she grabbed a jug and threw it from the attic to the ground. Stunned by the noise, the sages stopped their prayers momentarily, and in the intervening moment, Rabbi Yehuda's soul departed.
All right, very interesting. So first of all, who would have ever guessed that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's maid gets front and center in the Talmud. Interesting, right? So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was really one of the greatest rabbis who ever lived, one of the most consequential rabbis who've ever lived, and one of the most loved rabbis of his time. The Talmud says something unique. Usually rabbis, there are people who like the rabbi, a lot of people don't like the rabbi. There's always competition and fighting amongst rabbis themselves. All right, nothing new. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was unique. Was that he had the respect of every single rabbi alive. A very unique thing, which gave him tremendous power, and he did tremendous good things for the Jewish people. Here's the day of his death, and the sages are like, oh, come, this is a calamity for the Jewish people. We need Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi alive. So you can only imagine the sages are going in overdrive, praying and doing whatever they could do to keep him down here. All right. Now, what does the maid do? At the beginning, the maid is like with the rabbis. You know, we want the Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, we want him down here. So she is praying along with them. Then she sees his suffering. Okay, this is the key to the story. She sees how much this rabbi is suffering. And she's like, oh, no, okay, this already changes the story. And now she's going and praying, no, let him go. He's suffering so much, let him go. And she stops the prayer of the rabbis, and that allows death to come naturally by simply withholding care. Not medical care, spiritual care. But the prayer withholded care, and now he's gone. And that was something which she did in order to, because he was suffering. This is interesting. You could say, the maid of Rabbi, we're supposed to listen to what a maid did, but here's an interesting thing. The Talmud quotes it. And the Talmud doesn't start condemning her for, removing Rabbi Yehuda Nasi from this world. The Talmud, kind of just shares a story, which seems to tell us that the Talmud is giving us a story that we're meant to learn from. That's usually the Jewish attitude towards the story of the Talmud. The Talmud says something and says, by the way, we condemn this. This was a really bad idea. Okay, we know what the Talmud stand on something is. Talmud tells a story and just shared it with us. This seems like to say, you're learning a little bit of Judaism over here. So what would this text seem to be telling you? Text 7 over here. What would be the implication of this text? The Talmud is giving us this as guidance.
Passive. You don't have to affirmatively prolong life.
There seems to be a pretty passive statement of the Talmud that, passively withholding treatment is permitted. The Talmud seems, what was that?
Isn't that active?
Oh, no, because it wasn't like the rabbi's prayers were, like it was his lifeline. That was like constantly giving treatment. And now they're withholding that treatment. That's the question. Is that called withdrawing treatment or withholding treatment? That's a good question. But I guess it wouldn't be considered as withdrawing because it's not like, it's not a concrete thing. If something that was helping him, we're saying, okay, let's just remove that thing. And now we're going to allow nature to take its course, and nature was it. He died.
It's an odd story.
It's an odd story.
It's because it would be akin to tackling the doctor as the doctor's about to come and administer medicine.
Right, yeah, pop his tire. And then he died. I'm like, oh, it happened naturally.
Right.
It's odd. It's interesting.
Odd story.
And she's going against the rabbis. And interesting, the rabbis don't go and say, what did you do? You brought the biggest... Like, there's no end to the story as if she did anything wrong. Yes. The Talmud simply ends the story as if, like, that's it. This was... This... Right, now, 1 second. Her rationale maybe also, what the business is a maid going and getting in the, all these rabbis are praying and you're meddling in their holy spiritual affairs. She could have thought, legitimately, they have no clue how much Rabbi Yehuda is suffering. I tempt him. I know how much he's suffering. If they would only know how much he's suffering, they would also stop praying and say, let Rabbi Yehuda go. So she's intervening and assuming, hey, this is an interesting text. Now, it's interesting that this is considered a real text that we're going to look at, but let's hold our horses because we still got to get to what the big rabbis have to say. Text 8, and text 8, this is from Maimonides, so this is already a text of law, page 68, Richard. Go for it.
Shabbos laws are suspended in the face of danger to life, as are all other mitzvot. Consequently, we follow the direction of a professional physician on hand and attend to all of the patient's needs on Shabbos. If the structure collapses on Shabbos, the rubble must be cleared if there is even a doubt as to whether a person is beneath the debris, although clearing rubble is otherwise forbidden on Shabbos. If a person is discovered alive, even if they are injured and crushed to the extent that it is impossible for them to recover, we must continue clearing the debris to extricate them in the interest of preserving life for a short time.
This is a whole different tune over here, this text. Let's think about what's going on over here. Clearing rubble on Shabbos is a no-no for a Jew. We don't want to do that. Oh, but to save a life, for sure. But here's an interesting question. Will Torah say you violate Shabbos to save a life and give that life 10 extra minutes?
Yes.
So what the text is saying, yes. Now one second, let's just think what's going on over here. God forbid a building collapses, we start clearing the rubble, and that's our mandate. You got to go start saving life. Then you find the life, and you see that the man, he's too crushed. He lost too much blood. You kind of see this is a game over. He has a few more minutes. He has a half hour more to live. Tragic thing. Do you say, listen, we break Shabbos to save a life. We don't break Shabbos to give you 10 more minutes. You're dying anyways. We're not saving a life here. And that's the question. Maimonides rules, no. We'll go all out for 10 minutes. We're willing to compromise Shabbos, and that's a big, big deal. One 10 commandments over here. We're willing to compromise that. We will do the steps necessary just to get those 10 more minutes. What does this text seem to be telling us?
Not to throw the base.
This tells us this is singing a whole different tune. Text 7 was saying, yeah, there's suffering. Let's call this a quit. Text 8 is saying, no. We fight for every moment and we don't care what the prognosis is. The guy's dying and bleeding out anyways. We're going to go for those extra 5 minutes. We're going to break, and we're going to proactively try to do that. So we have a little bit of a tension over here between these two values. And this basically is the question, is the tension. Which one is more important? What's primary? Are we looking to allow death in the case of suffering? Or do we say we're really fighting for life over here, despite the suffering? And here what I want to show you is, and because we have multiple sources, and there's also additional sources as well, here we're going to see again, as we saw last week, and we're starting to get a real idea of raw Jewish law, how it works. There is going to be a spectrum of where the halachic authorities stand on this issue. So there's no one voice, because Judaism itself seems to be lending a position where there are multiple positions. There could be. Can treatment be withheld? There's no singular answer, and none of these rabbis that we're about to explore are wrong. They're all right, which means practically that if any of us, God forbid, are facing such a situation, hypothetically, may we never have to face such a situation, you have to, there's no cookie cutter answer. You have to speak to a rabbi. He has to understand the situation very, very well. And he has to look and see, based on this unique situation, how, where along the spectrum precisely he would guide you to do. Can treatment be withheld? Let's look at what 3 leading contemporary halachic voices say. All right? Voice number 1 of the issue is Rabbi Waldenberg, who we started off the class with. He gets the question. Let's go back to his question. The 11-year-old boy suffering from cancer in the brain stem. There's now another, after intervention, after putting in the tube. What happens now? We got to redo it. Something's off. Do we have to do this now? What does Rabbi Waldenberg say? Rabbi Waldenberg is on this side of the spectrum, and look at what Rabbi Waldenberg says. Text 9, page 70.
Jewish law asserts that we violate the laws of Shabbat even for the sake of one who is severely injured and can only live a little while longer. When we extricate this person, we inevitably prolong their suffering. Nevertheless, we are obligated to make every effort to prolong their life. If this is so on Shabbat, certainly on a weekday, we are obliged to make every effort to prolong life, even for a brief duration, and even if this entails additional suffering.
Look at that. Rabbi Waldenberg is giving us a very tough pill to swallow. He's taking a hard line. He says, we never withheld treatment. Right? Rabbi Waldenberg says, 1 second, we have the opportunity to add life over here, and you're going to say, no, the person's suffering too much. He says, that's not Jewish. Look at the text. We go all in just to get an extra few more minutes of life. And what he says, what he ruled to this family in Chicago, is you got to do it. You got to do it. And it's a very tough pill to swallow. What he's saying is, and I know here's an 11-year-old boy, and he's going to suffer, and you're prolonging his suffering, and who knows what other strains on the family it's causing, but you know what? This is what we do for a life. He thinks it's a very transcendent perspective. Now, you could ask Rabbi Waldenberg, but 1 second, where's the text from the Talmud? What happened with the maid of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi? She's withholding care, and that seems to be kosher. Rabbi Waldenberg writes about that. You know what he says? He says, yeah, she had a valid point, but she was in the minority opinion. She was a maid. Can you imagine? He could have just been flipping himself. What are you talking about? The maid? All the sages were praying. What do we care what she did? He says, no, we do take her seriously, because if the Talmud quotes her, that means she had a valid opinion. But we have to remember, she's one against many. The way halacha works is we follow majority opinion. It's clear that all the rabbis felt we do have to keep on intervention. We do have to keep on administering care, which the care that they were able to provide was prayers. And therefore, yeah, we value her opinion, but halacha does not follow the minority opinion. That's what Rabbi Waldenberg says, and this is what he told his family. Okay, that's a little bit of a tough pill to swallow. He never gives an allowance to ever go and say the person's suffering too much. We're dragging this out too much. Let's just let this end naturally. He never allows that. That's a bit tough. Okay. But he's one opinion. And by the way, he argues that the maid was a minority opinion. Rabbi Waldenberg is also a minority opinion. Okay. Who else do we got here in the arena? Let's now go to the next great halachic authority. Rabbi Waldenberg is in Israel. Let's now learn what Rabbi Moshe Feinstein says. Here in America, he lives in the Lower East Side, East Coast rabbi. When the rabbi had halachic questions, medical questions, it always went to Rabbi Feinstein. He's a very important voice. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein passed away in 1986. And his response is foundational for the modern application of Jewish law. He goes to the total opposite spectrum. This is what he says. Max, let's read text 10a, page 71.
If physicians can neither cure a patient nor ease their suffering, they should not administer treatments that only serve to prolong briefly the terminal patient's life and suffering. We infer this from the Talmud's description of Rabbi Yehuda's final illness. The sage's prayers did not produce a cure for Rabbi Yehuda or lessen his agony, but only prolonged his ordeal for as long as they continued to pray. Rabbi Yehuda's maid, who was knowledgeable in Torah, said, "May it be your will that those above prevail over those below." Upon seeing that her prayers could not be effective as long as the sages continued their supplications, she took a jug and smashed it in order to silence them. At that moment, Rabbi Yehuda passed away. This incident is cited in the Talmud to teach us that the maid acted correctly. We can derive from this that a physician should not administer to a patient a treatment that will neither cure them nor alleviate their torment, but will only serve to prolong their life for a short duration in agony. The physician should only administer such treatment if it will soothe the patient.
Oh, okay, this is really a whole different tune. But once I forgot to tell you one interesting little point. Rabbi Waldenberg says you cannot withhold treatment, but that's only for treatments that we know work. When it comes to risky treatments, no. That's already off the table, which touches upon last week's class. He's talking about a treatment which we know will help cure the patient, even if it won't really cure the terminal illness. But it will help and actually, but if it's a maybe that we're going to get more life, then he says you don't have to do that.
Palliative will, something you would approve.
Yeah. So basically, Rabbi Waldenberg is against hospice. The whole idea of saying, let's let this person die in comfort and care. Rabbi says, no. Till the very last minute, you've got to be doing whatever you can. No hospice for him. Okay, but let's go to Rabbi Feinstein. Rabbi Feinstein says, yeah, you could withhold treatment. The person's suffering. It's a terminal illness. We know from last class, we know terminal illness is usually 12 months. The person's dying in 12 months. They're suffering. There's no mitzvah to prolong this life of suffering. That's what Rabbi Feinstein says. And he fully throws his support behind the maid of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. She did it. The Talmud clearly takes her position seriously as a halachic position. She knew Torah. I guess even the maid of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Right? She wasn't just any maid. It was fit. Okay? So, he says that is precedence that you're allowed to withhold care as long as, again, terminal illness and there's suffering. But he says, if there's a medicine that you could give, if there's treatment you could give, which will lessen the suffering, then you got to do that, of course. We're talking about when the suffering is not going to go away, you're just prolonging the suffering. Yes, Akhil?
Who determines the level of suffering? Let's say.
That's a great question.
Because what if he still wants it?
First, one second. This is not saying that you're not allowed to give him treatment. If the patient wants treatment, of course. Rabbi Feinstein would say, if the patient wants to do it, absolutely. But do we say no? Do we tell the patient, halacha mandates you to keep on living, and the patient says, but I can't take this anymore? He's saying, no, you don't need to do that. Rabbi Waldenberg would say, you have to tell the patient that this is against halacha. You need to keep on fighting, even if the patient says, I don't want to fight. Again, it's a tough pill to swallow. Rabbi Feinstein says, if it's optional, if the patient wants to do it, of course. Okay, but you're saying a very good point. Okay, because we keep on quibbling. He says if there's pain. Well, how much pain? You go to a hospital and say, give me your pain from 1 to 10. It's an arbitrary number. How do you measure the pain over here? It's a great question. This is where you need a a halachic rabbi, halachic authority to help you case by case and try to feel out what's happening and to try to give the right answer over here. Okay, but there's a key caveat, or there's a key detail to what Rabbi Feinstein says. He says withhold care. So he's a fan of hospice over here, right? He's saying, yeah, you could say, let them die in peace, let's give them comfort and everything, but we're not going to try to prolong their life. We'll let them die naturally. He's a supporter of that. But he differs very much from what we read the Supreme Court says between care, natural human care, and natural human needs to medical treatment, medical intervention. Let's read what he says over here. Who just read? Max? So, Chana Bracha, you want to read? Text 10b, page 73.
In my response to the physicians, I wrote that one should administer oxygen to a terminally ill patient who has trouble breathing, even though no cure will result, because it eases the patient's suffering. For inability to breathe is tremendously painful. Accordingly, you asked regarding a terminally ill patient who is unable to eat normally. Should we feed him and thus extend his life while prolonging his suffering, when it appears that he has no pain in abstaining from food? My response: clearly, we must feed the patient, provided that it will not cause any harm, for food surely strengthens the patient somewhat, despite the possibility that neither the patient nor his attendants are aware of this effect. There is no need, however, to provide medicine, with the assumption that that it too will strengthen the patient, and the distinction is obvious. Eating is a natural need that is required to strengthen one's body and mind.
Oh, so he says, 1 second. There's a difference between basic human necessities to medical treatment. So he says, when we say you don't have to give treatment, I don't mean oxygen. No. A human being needs oxygen. So getting intubated or on a machine to help them breathe, that is a must. That you can never withhold. Feeding tube. You don't say, we're not going to give them food and let them just die naturally. No. That's not what I'm talking about. They have to eat. So what he's going to say is, necessities of life are not included in this. When I say that, yes, you could withhold treatment, I don't mean necessities of life, hydration, nutrition, oxygen. I'm talking about giving them antibiotics if they all of a sudden have an infection. That you could say, you know what, they got an infection, and they're terminally ill and they're suffering, let it just play itself out. That, he says, you could do, but not talking about the necessities of life. This is Rabbi Feinstein. So we have two totally opposite extremes, and each one is holding onto a different text and saying, I think this text is the main guiding text of what Judaism wants us to do. Okay. Let's quickly look at the middle position. The third position, which is another contemporary rabbi, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he gives a little bit of a middle position. He sees conflicting values. On the one hand, we do have a source from the Torah that does say that when there's pain, okay, there's a lot of pain, we don't need to do this. You could withhold treatment, there's pain. On the other hand, we do see from the other texts from Maimonides on the debris, on Shabbos, we do fight for every single moment of life. So he finds a way to kind of tie both in, and he finds a middle ground. Let's read text 11. This is from a Professor Abraham in Israel, who is the main conveyor of the halachic rulings of Rabbi Auerbach. And this is what he writes, Yechiel, text 11.
So Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach of righteous memory told me the following. There is a difference between treatments that satisfy the natural needs of a patient, or those considered ordinary treatments, and those that are considered extraordinary treatments. For example, if a patient suffers from metastasized cancer and is about to die, although they are in pain, we may not withhold the required oxygen, nutrition, and hydration. If they suffer from diabetes, we may not withhold insulin with the intention that they will die sooner. Blood transfusions and any other medication that the patient requires, such as antibiotics, should not be withheld. On the other hand, there is no obligation to initiate an extraordinary medical procedure. That is a procedure that will itself cause much pain in addition to the pain that this patient already experiences, if this treatment has no chance of curing the underlying disease, but only of extending life for a short duration.
So he says over here, let's make a distinction between ordinary treatment and extraordinary treatment, which the way he defines it is non-painful treatments, like a medication, to already a painful treatment, which is like what, amputation, or I don't know, some heavy level intervention, which is already very painful for the patient. And he says that's where we could draw the line. When it comes to a terminal patient, we could decline treatment that causes them severe pain. But if it doesn't cause them severe pain, we do have to keep on administering that and trying to continue their life, even if it will prolong their suffering. Now, Rabbi Auerbach, though, writes that we do have to make a strong effort to convince the patient to even do the painful treatments to help them prolong life. So he's saying, but listen, at the end of the day, we do want to encourage them to really accept even any life-extending treatment, but they're not obligated to accept. That's his middle position over here. The point is over here that when such a case comes up, that there's a sensitive situation, the case is not looking good, do we have to keep on fighting and doing turning over every single stone? You have to speak to a rabbi. What they're going to do is they're going to be looking at all this precedent and the entire spectrum, and they're going to look at your case, see who it most aligns with, see how extreme it is, and they're going to give you a halachic ruling based on all of this. But dear friends, before we go tonight, it's already 9:03, but I want to conclude with this. As much as today's class was a conversation about death, and unfortunately it's a very, very difficult subject to learn about, I also hope that we could walk away with a certain new inspiration and a whole new appreciation for the meaning and the value of life, and how Judaism sees our lives are so precious, how much meaning is there in our lives, and if there's meaning in the worst moments of life, we have to hold on to the moments where maybe we're not thinking about life. We have to just realize how precious every single moment of our day is, how impactful it is, and just how there's a divine purpose in every single moment. And on that note that we're going to conclude today's class with, I want to show you a little video which will wrap up today's class beautifully. All right, you ready? A little bit over time. Okay, we're not going to... Oh, let me just show you this over here. This is a little bit of a conclusion. According to Judaism, what are the factors that play a role in end-of-life decision? Number one, age does not matter. We don't care if it's an 11-year-old or a 104-year-old. Age is simply not a relevant factor when it comes to end-of-life decisions, because Judaism does not value life differently when it comes to a baby, or it doesn't matter. Mental ability doesn't make a difference. They could be a vegetable state. The vegetable state is not terminal illness. So Judaism would never say you could end a life earlier. Mental ability has nothing to do with it. Physical ability has nothing to do with it. The only two factors that matter to Judaism is, number one, the prognosis. Is this terminal illness? That's number one. And number two, the pain and suffering. Pain and suffering is a real thing. But other than that, there's very little that matters over here. Okay, let's do this over here.
I was talented. I could teach, lecture, sing, dance, and play guitar. I was strong and handy. Within 2 years, I watched all that slip away. I felt irrelevant. I was in jail. What possible purpose could I have, if I couldn't communicate? It hurts not to be able to kiss and hug my children, not to be able to talk and play with them. I could have been prey to a why-me attitude and fallen into depression. The problem with why me, is that your focus is on me, the ultimate false deity. Instead, knowing that this is from Hashem makes me think, how could I serve His purpose from my situation? What can be done from my position now that could not be accomplished when I was well? Do I pray? Do I cry out to Hashem that He heal me? Yes, all the time. However, the illness has not broken my spirit. I continue using my difficulties as a platform to lift others up. What keeps me going is the realization that God is real, that He has a plan for the world and I am part of it. Everyone is a part of it and everyone's part is important. So if He put me in this position, He must want something of me that I can only do in this position. When you see it this way, instead of feeling down when you are in a challenging situation, you are filled with a sense of purpose. I choose to focus on the positive parts of my life, and that keeps me going. There is my wife, my children, family, friends, and you. Even within the suffering and difficulties, I can still contribute and help others. Through my blog, I have the opportunity to learn and teach Torah. I forge new friendships with the teens and yeshiva boys that visit. Find your mission and strength specifically from your situation. You don't have to be challenged with suffering to learn this lesson. You need only be alive, Because it is Hashem that chooses for you to be alive. Recognizing this is the beginning of meaning in your life. If you are suffering, know that there is purpose in your struggle that can only be realized through your struggle. Find a way to turn your pain into positive, your struggle into strength. There is something else being asked of you, a new stage of your purpose and mission. True, I can't do many of the things I once could, but with what I do have, I have found ways to make a difference. The things I love to do most, to teach and lift others up, I'm still doing. Before, I would speak. Now, I write. It seems that because of my predicament, the words are more effective. In every challenge, or even tragedy, there is an opportunity. You don't have to fight it. Find a way for your struggle to take you to the next level. By taking this attitude, I was filled with a mission to uplift as many as I can through my articles. And my wife Dina became one of the most inspirational speakers and has uplifted tens of thousands. It doesn't fix the problem, but it makes our lives more meaningful and therefore more bearable. Being crushed brought stronger connections, new abilities, higher purpose, and deeper meaning. I've been blessed with a voice that can't sing, with a body that doesn't work. So I dance to a new rhythm. I'm Yitzi Hurwitz, and I know that I matter.
Wow.
He's a philosopher.
That is crazy. All right, dear friends. And with that, let us conclude on that note. And dear friends, next week, our next big topic, going from end of life to beginning of life, pregnancy, abortion, and all those types of questions in that area of life. And once again, a topic where Judaism comes with sensitivity, with nuance. Let's do it next week, God willing. Have a wonderful night. May God bless you all. Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you, Marshall, for sponsoring this special class. What's on the menu next week? Well, we need a sponsor. Okay, so dear friends. But good question. Good challenge. All right, dear friends.